For millennia, the oceans lay outside the dominion of man. A state's influence extended only 3 nautical miles from the coast, a little further than a cannonball could travel. But then, humans discovered the ocean floor, and the largest land grab in world history began.
I'm Tom McLean. I'm an adventurer. I've rowed the ocean, the North Atlantic, twice. I've sailed it twice in small yachts and also crossed it in a bottle boat. I lived on Rockall in this, some people call it a survival capsule, but I call it a wooden box. It's a house. This is my house. This is a one-man house. I lived in here for 40 days. It did the job. It kept the wind off me. I was warm and dry. But don't forget, I'm right at the top of the cliff. It's just straight down to the sea.
Tom McLean is one of the UK's greatest adventurers. He crossed the Atlantic 5 times, the first time in a rowboat, once in a vessel shaped like a beer bottle. For his latest trip, he sailed from Newfoundland to Portugal in the smallest sailboat ever to cross the Atlantic. Soon, McLean will travel to New York in a boat built to resemble a whale. But Rockall was more than an adventure, however. Rockall was a mission done in service to Mother England.
Somebody said, oh, well, what about St Kilda? And I was thinking of going there, but somebody else said Rockall. Rockall's right out there in the middle of the Atlantic, and there seems to be a dispute who owns it. And I thought, well, if I be a first civilian to reside on Rockall, that would help the case.
It wasn't quite so good. The wind carried their safety line off target, so chancing all, they closed in without it.
Back off.
It's very dangerous there now. You can see how lumpy it is. Quite dangerous, see?
They were far from okay after that momentary triumph.
But then, whack, the big wave, and down I go. Down. Now it's 50 foot straight down into the foam.
Slides helplessly into the surf.
The landing at Rockall in 1985 almost cost Tom McLean his life. But he eventually made it to safety and corks flew in London. Getting to the top was only the beginning, however. Great Britain wanted to claim the rock as an island, but for that to happen, international law stipulated that Tom must remain there for 21 days or more.
When the boat turned to go home and leave me for the first time, I was glad to see them go. I was on my adventure. I'm here with the rock and the birds. I'm happy to be here. I've achieved. I'm making history.
A patriotic gesture to remind those who may challenge it that Britannia rules these waves.
For the UK, it was about more than just claiming a lump of granite in the ocean. The real objective was to secure the resource-rich area around Rockall. The islet was to play a key role in British territorial claims. The main players in British maritime claims work in an office on the south coast of England.
It's a fascinating area of work to do. There's not often, as somebody working in ocean science, that you do get the opportunity to mix both the legal and the technical aspects and see how they work together almost in order to develop something on behalf of the state. Where we have the United Kingdom to the east, and as we come further west, we pass the rock itself onto the Rockall Plateau. The land area of Great Britain is 240,000 square kilometres. The area that the UK have submitted for the Hatton Rockall area is 163,000 square kilometres.
It looks good there in the telescope. My main reason to go to Rockall was to inhabit it, and if I stayed in international law less than 21 days, I'm only visiting. I had to stay more than 21 days, and by staying there more than 21 days, in fact 40 days, it wasn't a rock, it's an island. I made it an island.
Rockall. For the UK to claim the territorial sea around the rock, it had to prove that it was inhabitable. Yet the islet could be easily confused with any rock, and Tom's stay was controversial. So controversial that the UK had to put another territory into the mix, St Kilda. The archipelago increased the British Crown's claim by 160,000 square kilometres. St Kilda has been deserted ever since its 36 remaining inhabitants left almost a century ago. But humans lived there once, and they could live there again, at least theoretically. What does the UK want with all this water? What do you own by owning a piece of the ocean? The idea of the ocean has changed over time. World maps from the past show how rulers and their cartographers once saw the world and what they thought an ocean is. Their maps show what was important to them and what wasn't.
Before 1492, before Columbus's journey to the Americas, the ocean as a broad portion of the world's surface, as a major space that figured into our sense of the globe, really wasn't there.
In the Middle Ages, the world was thought to be a single large landmass, a veritable megacontinent without oceans.
So the ocean really plays no role at all except to show a limit. The ocean shows the limit of society. It shows the limit of God's kingdom, of the kingdom on earth. To the east, beyond the ocean, lay Eden, lay the promised land, lay heaven. Beyond that, there was really nothing mapped.
For most of human history, the oceans were projection screens for the imagination, an unexplored and irrepressible world, a mighty barrier, a place of terror. Despite its dangers, the ocean became more and more important over the centuries. As global trade developed, merchant fleets transformed the oceans into vast shipping lanes. People from past centuries would never have dreamed of laying claim to the ocean. For them, it was a blue expanse fraught with dangers, an obstacle that needed to be overcome as sailors journeyed to foreign lands.
And of course, the two-dimensional bit is ironic because the ocean is so materially three-dimensional. You know, you step into the ocean, you sink.
Yet in the 19th and 20th centuries, something happened that changed our idea of the ocean forever. The seabed became a place of exploration. In 1858, as the transatlantic cable was being laid, engineers noticed variation in the ocean's depth. Could this be evidence of undersea mountains? The first scientific study of the ocean floor was undertaken by the German survey vessel Meteor in 1925. Scientists today liken the expedition to Columbus's first voyage, for it began the exploration of a terra incognita, a previously unknown land. Over the next few decades, a picture of the undersea cosmos gradually emerged.
Suddenly we've kind of developed this new awareness of the seabed, of the underneath. Of course, this itself is also kind of a fantasized idealization of the ocean because you're imagining that you can see through the water column. The water is missing from here. The fish are missing. Suddenly, the topography of the seabed is quite literally brought to the surface.
The discovery of the seabed radically changed our idea of the ocean. The ocean was no longer just water. It was first and foremost a landmass, a vast expanse that belonged to no one, but that could perhaps be seized. This man had a groundbreaking idea.
The President of the United States, Harry S. Truman, a man whose influence as far-reaching as any other man on earth.
Harry Truman asserted his country's influence with a novel claim. This ocean was a territory underwater that could be annexed as part of the United States. Enormous quantities of oil were found in the Gulf of Mexico, but the oil lay beyond the 3-mile zone in which coastal states could exercise their sovereign rights. Truman wanted more. He wanted new territory for the United States. The superpower needed more oil urgently. Oil reserves on the mainland no longer sufficed.
Our dependence on these minerals and fuels and raw materials is so great and our supply so uncertain that we are moving as rapidly as we can and by every means that ingenuity can devise to expand facilities, to step up production, find new sources, develop substitutes, and bring in increased supplies from foreign sources.
After the Second World War, in 1945, the then U.S. President Truman issued a proclamation declaring that the natural resources in the seabed and subsoil belong to the United States of America.
In convincing the world that the American president not only had the will but also the right to incorporate undersea territory, Truman used an argument that built on a recent discovery. Some areas of the seabed are oceanic, others are continental.
The U.S. had to have this kind of basis of a geological link between its landmass and the landmass submerged and linked to its territory. And the idea of the geological continental shelf is the basis which the U.S. saw as a legal basis as well. They had to find a link, and the basis that they found most convincing was, of course, science. Yeah.
Also wir sind jetzt hier an der Nordseeküste bei Ebbe und hier sieht man sehr schön, wie der Meeresspiegel letztendlich definiert, wo unsere Küstenlinie ist. Das heißt also, wir sehen sehr schön, wie der Kontinent letztendlich auch in das Meer weitergeht.
The argument that the continent continues underwater made up the core of Truman's justification. This was all the more convincing because the historical events that legitimized this theory reach back far into history. Impossibly far.
Kontinentaldrift gibt es seit etwa 2 Milliarden, Entschuldigung, Jumps. Also, kontinentale Drift gibt es seit etwa 2 Milliarden Jahren Minimum.
Wilfried Jorkat is a geophysicist at the Alfred Wegener Institute in Bremerhaven. Alfred Wegener noticed that the coastlines of North and South America seemed to fit together with those of Europe and Africa like pieces of a puzzle.
Und er fand sehr große Ähnlichkeiten in der Geologie, in der Flora und Fauna und forderte daraus, dass die Kontinente einmal zusammenhängen mussten, weil sonst nicht zu erklären ist, dass sich die Tierwelt oder die Pflanzenwelt ähnlich entwickelt hat.
Scientists today believe there was once a supercontinent that at some point began to drift apart. In the early 20th century, this idea seemed completely preposterous.
Deswegen wurde seine Theorie, ich sage mal, sehr kontrovers diskutiert. Er wurde tatsächlich als Spinner abgetan, aber er hatte damals gar keine Chance zu beweisen, dass er richtig lag. Dies ist jetzt unser Superkontinent und wenn wir in die Erdgeschichte 180 Millionen Jahre zurückgehen, wäre das Afrika, Südamerika, Antarktis und Indien als eine Landmasse. Ich fange jetzt mal an, ein Stück rauszuschneiden und dieses Stück hier repräsentiert zum Beispiel Indien. Also ich ziehe jetzt hier dieses Tortenstück raus, das heißt der Kontinent wandert weg. Und dieser Bereich hier, das wäre der Kontinentalsockel. Und hier haben wir so eine kleine Delle, das heißt also, diese Spitze oder diese Abbruchkante wird gedehnt und geologisch deformiert. Und diese Schelfgebiete enthalten dann auch die Ressourcen, auf die viele Firmen abzielen, was Öl und Gas betrifft.
The idea that this submerged land mass is really a prolongation of your land territory, you know, it's who can argue that this would not be part of your territory?
The more people became aware of the large quantities of oil and gas in the ocean floor, the more coastal states tried to claim it for themselves. They called for an international law based on the geological definition of a continental shelf, yet many states resisted. The Earth's history has not favored each country equally.
Zum Beispiel Russland hat einen sehr breiten Schelf von über 200 Seemeilen, das heißt also über 400 Kilometer breit, wohingegen vor dem südöstlichen Afrika der Kontinentalrand nur 20 Kilometer breit ist. Und das ist einfach geologisch bedingt und im heutigen Kontext Glück oder Pech für das Land.
To balance out the geological differences that emerged over hundreds of millions of years, the nations of the world abandoned the geological definition of a continental shelf in favor of a legal definition that applies to all coastal states uniformly. Regardless of its undersea geology, every country is granted a continental shelf extending 200 nautical miles out to sea, its exclusive economic zone.
So the idea of this 200 as a magic number became acceptable to many states at the conference. But the broad margin states did not accept this because, of course, they, as far as they're concerned, they would come out as a loser. And it's not just the U.S., also other states such as Canada. Russia is also one of those states. So they were not willing to give this up.
Ultimately, states with a wide continental shelf prevailed. A clause with momentous consequences was quietly appended to the Law of the Sea Convention. The clause in question is Article 76. It says that a state can lay claim to its geological continental shelf in addition to its legal continental shelf, provided that the state can supply data demonstrating the shelf's outer limits within 10 years. The time limit triggered a veritable run on the world's oceans and the largest land allocation in world history. For the first time in the history of humanity, a land grab occurred based not anymore on traditional forms of power, but rather on geological findings.
Scientists have a special role in the case of the ocean because the geophysical difference isn't as obvious. It's not as experienced. If you're on an island, you tend to know you're on an island. You can experience where land meets water. I have no idea where the seabed ends, where the continental shelf ends. And, nobody does from everyday observation.
So I would like to explain you now how actually Article 76 of the Convention on the Law of the Sea actually works. And it's all about natural prolongation of the landmass. So we have a landmass here. Actually the land continues underwater, something like this.
Everything is decided by the point where the continental gradient drops off at the foot of the continental slope. This spot is used to calculate the shelf's outer limits. A state can choose between two formulas. It can extend its borders 60 nautical miles or 111 kilometers from this point seawards. It can be more advantageous, however, to use the sediment thickness rule. Because the sediments originate on the mainland, the state has a territorial claim to this part of the seabed. The thicker the layer of sediment, the better. According to the thickness rule, the continental shelf extends until the point where the thickness of sediment amounts to 1% of the distance from the foot of the slope. Because no one but geologists understand geological data, only they can determine how far a state's sovereign rights extend over the ocean. Hence, a commission of experts was founded in New York, where the global community recognizes states and their sovereign borders.
Ich war von 1997 bis 2002 Mitglied der Festland-Sockel-Begrenzungskommission oder im Englischen Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf. Das Positive an der ganzen Sache ist, dass es diese Institution überhaupt gibt. Denn sonst hätten die sich schon viel früher, hätten die zu den Waffen gegriffen und Kriege geführt. Ja?
Karl Hinz helped build this commission, yet now he is among its fiercest critics.
Sie haben in der Kommission nur noch Vertreter von potenziellen Klimastaaten. Der schwört zwar, dass er als Experte und Fachmann seine Arbeit macht, aber die nationalen Interessen, glaube ich, lässt er nicht aus dem Auge.
The 21 geologists of the Continental Shelf Commission work at building DC-2 on United Nations Plaza. Filming here is forbidden. None of the members may speak to the public, in spite of, or precisely because of, the fact that their decisions can change maritime power relations.
Diese Leute unterstehen einer Confidentiality-Regel und deshalb sind die sehr zurückhaltend. Also, wenn Sie fragen, ja, wie läuft's denn so? Und dann wird der Ihnen nichts sagen, weil es durchaus sein könnte, dass er ein Break of Confidentiality Verfahren an den Hals kriegt und das heißt, Sie schmeißen ihn raus.
A commission of experts was founded in New York, where the global community recognizes states and their sovereign borders.
Das Positive an der ganzen Sache ist, dass es diese Institution überhaupt gibt.
For the first time in the history of humanity, a land grab occurred, based not anymore on traditional forms of power, but rather on geological findings. The experts who tip the scales in rulings about maritime territories are notoriously unforthcoming. Yet one member has agreed to speak about the Commission on the condition that he meet us not in New York, but in Brittany, in France.
Personally, I have always felt that we could do an effort to actually be more transparent and to communicate more. So my name is Walter Roost. I'm a marine geophysicist. I work at Ifremer in France, and I'm a member of the UN Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf. Well, the first thing I should say is that, you know, the work of the Commission, yes, it's true, is quite treated in a very confidential fashion. And the main reason behind that from the beginning, well, there's two reasons. One is that we're dealing with sovereign rights of states. Secondly, many of the states submit data that are actually confidential data derived from petroleum industry, for instance. So, and those data, they have to be treated with a very high level of confidentiality.
There were powerful interests behind the state's petitions. Seabed data have enormous economic significance. This information contains important clues for where natural resources might be located. Industries and states are not inclined to share this information, which can be worth billions.
I think what I could say is that as members of the Commission, I think we consider ourselves really scientific and technical experts. But we also are very conscientious of the fact that our recommendations or our decisions that we make have huge impact, both politically, economically, and so on. So, is it possible to distinguish those two?
The geologists in the Commission have the job of evaluating continental shelf data submitted by countries. Officially, the Commission only makes recommendations, but since their conclusions are not corroborated by anyone else, they have de facto authority to decide which nations get which territories. 5 nations that border the Arctic Ocean are in a bid to extend their sovereign rights in the direction of the North Pole: Denmark, Canada, US, Norway and Russia. Each wants as much territory as possible. The area is estimated to contain 10% of the world's oil reserves.
Durch Zufall wurden mir Mails zugeschickt, die von russischen Kollegen verschickt worden sind an jemand anders, wo drin es hieß, Hints has put down the Russian submission. Ja. Da dachte ich, oh, jetzt kannst du erstmal nicht nach Russland reisen.
Russia understood how to take advantage of the new law early on. In 2002, it was one of the first countries to submit a claim to the Continental Shelf Commission. The Russians asserted rights to no less than the entire Central Arctic, an area of 1.5 million square kilometers, including the North Pole. Karl Hintz was known as the man who shot down Russia's claim on account of insufficient scientific evidence. But Russia employed a trick that many states are using to push through their claims even after they are rejected.
Also eigentlich darf ich darüber gar nicht sprechen, das ist alles Confidentiality. Das ist eigentlich verboten. Diese Empfehlungen, die die Kommission damals schriftlich festgehalten haben und die auch zuerst zugänglich waren, die waren auf einmal verschwunden. Auf Wunsch der russischen Regierung, die gesagt hat, die gehen noch nicht raus und wir kommen mit einer revised submission zurück.
In the race to control the world's oceans, data is key. If a claim is rejected, nations can have researchers collect more information. This effectively allows countries to circumvent the Commission's 10-year deadline. Governments can submit new reports until their claims are approved. Each additional geological submission brings with it fresh room for interpretation.
The name of the game is, if you want to have the best answer for your maritime boundaries and or the best answer for your extended continental shelf, you go out and collect the best modern day data possible to go and use for your final application for law of the sea to ensure that the answer is the best that it can be.
Russia has since submitted revised data to the Continental Shelf Commission. But Canada and Denmark want the North Pole too. How can other countries with the same scientific arguments claim the same territory? What is an ocean? And what is a continent? It is a question of perspective. The Commission evaluates the scientific data and makes a decision either for or against a state's claim. Once a claim is approved, it is binding and cannot be reversed.
I don't know. I mean, we have no... If we replace all members of the Commission, hypothetically, we have 21 new members, and we would give them the same case, would we get the same result? I can be quite certain we will not get exactly the same result. So I don't believe that the Commission can be 100% right, because 100% right does not exist in natural sciences. We're talking about interpreting based on relatively sparse data.
The Commission is a group of experts selected by the General Assembly of the United Nations. But of the 21 members on the Commission, 19 come from countries that have applied for territorial expansions. Do national interests play a role in the decisions of its members? What is certain is that their recommendations are not contested.
Das ist interessant. Die Festlandsockelkommission hat kein Kontrollorgan. Das ist eigentlich, man kann sagen, in der Welt einmalig, dass sie keine, man kann fragen, wer kontrolliert eigentlich die Festlandsockelkommission? Nobody.
Why Kingston? Well, there were two candidates, Jamaica and Malta. And all I can say is that Jamaica won. So we ended up in Kingston.
Michael Lodge works for the International Seabed Authority, or ISA. It is a type of executive council for the ocean floor. They supervise what the states are unable to get their hands on with continental shelf claims. The ISA's official motto is that the deep seabed is the common heritage of mankind. They believe that the ocean belongs to everyone.
The common heritage concept includes a number of basic ideas. The first idea is that it's an area over which no single state can claim sovereignty, and it is to be administered for the benefit of all mankind.
The Seabed Authority has the task of redistributing riches that are not in the sovereign areas of national states. If a country or company makes a profit from mining minerals, the ISA ensures that poor countries and countries without coastal borders receive a share. When founding the ISA, states agreed to make environmental regulations as strict as possible for deep-sea mining in international waters, because no one knows its effect on the maritime ecosystem.
So the ISA has no standing in the Continental Shelf Commission. It's not an observer to the Commission. It has no right to object to a recommendation of the Commission. The Commission's recommendations go only to the coastal state that is making the submission and not to anybody else.
The ocean covers over 360 million square kilometers, almost 3/4 of the Earth's surface. Over 40% of this area has been assigned to legal continental shelves. Claims on expanded geological continental shelves make up another 10% of the ocean. It is now projected that around 57% of the oceans will eventually be under the control of coastal states.
In the year 2000, that's the latest set of figures that we have, the International Seabed Authority, which is based in Jamaica, they came up with an estimate as they saw that governments were starting to work through this more recent component for law of the sea for the extended continental shelf. They have a figure just below 12,000 US trillion dollars is the in situ estimate of seabed resources in the extended continental shelves.
Estimates about the quantity of natural resources buried in the seabed are highly speculative. But if the figure of 12,000 trillion US dollars is right, it would be enough to write every person on Earth a check for $1.5 million. France is one of the countries leading the charge to claim a piece of the pie, but La Grande Nation has a leg up over many other states. A colonial past.
Oui, ça a été une surprise de découvrir qu'on pouvait peut-être obtenir plus que ce qui était prévu au départ. Et le gouvernement, quand il a commencé à réfléchir en 2002, à cette question, très rapidement, on a fait la liste. On s'est réunis, c'était au cabinet du Premier ministre, et on a fait la liste des territoires où nous allions demander des extensions. Voilà.
Thanks to its colonial past, France administers islands in almost every ocean of the world. Now it stands to gain substantial maritime territory in each. Currently, France has 11 claims pending at the Continental Shelf Commission.
Guyane française et des Antilles, plusieurs zones dans l'océan Indien, autour de l'île de la Réunion et des îles de Kerguelen, Crozet et Saint-Paul et Amsterdam. Et les autres zones outre-mer concernées sont évidemment dans le Pacifique, avec la Nouvelle-Calédonie, la Polynésie française et Wallis et Futuna. Et la dernière zone qui a donné lieu pour l'instant au dernier dossier déposé, c'est Saint-Pierre-et-Miquelon en Atlantique.
France has claimed territories amounting to some 12 million square kilometers, around 20 times the size of continental France. If the claims are approved, it will become the world's second largest maritime nation, its sovereign rights stretching over an area of the ocean almost as large as the entire Arctic.
La science, dans cette affaire d'extension du plateau continental, est l'élément déterminant, l'élément important. Parce que vous ne pouvez pas aller devant la commission du plateau continental et dire « Écoutez, je suis membre permanent du Conseil de sécurité et donc je veux une extension du plateau continental ». Ça ne marche pas. La politique n'a pas sa place ici.
Oui, ce que nous souhaitons pouvoir argumenter avec ce type d'échantillon est de pouvoir démontrer que les structures que nous allons considérer comme le prolongement naturel et le plateau continental au large des îles de Polynésie se différencient des grands fonds océaniques. De ces échantillons contribuent effectivement à vérifier le test d'appartenance, le test de paternité pour l'ensemble de ce que l'on considère comme le plateau continental, en pouvant différencier et de ce qui est le grand fond océanique dans les plus grandes profondeurs.
C'est ça qu'il faut comprendre. C'est pas la France toute seule qui a fait cela. C'est parce que le droit international permet à un État de pouvoir aller jusqu'à 200 000 nautiques. Parce que chaque île peut développer sa propre zone économique. Chaque île. Alors, si vous prenez la Polynésie française dans le Pacifique, à elle seule, la Polynésie française apporte à la France près de 4 millions de kilomètres carrés.
Islands represent a crucial trump card in the battle to control the world's oceans. It's all about geometry. Because islands are surrounded by water, their sovereign territory extends around them in a circle. Even if an island were just a small rock, its maritime zone would be larger than Germany. If a group of islands forms an archipelago, a common baseline around the entire cluster of islands is used to calculate the maritime territory. This man is Japan's hope in the race to claim the world's oceans. He cracked the genetic code of a life form that could help Japan add several 100,000 square kilometers to its territory. Hajime Kayane is a geoscientist at the University of Tokyo. He specializes in corals, organisms that display characteristics of both animals and plants.
サンゴは動物、生き物ですけれども、体の中に植物を飼っていて、これが活発に光合成をして食べ物を与える。
Yet Kayane has delved further into their biology, into the secret of their reproduction, and found a method for breeding them on a large scale.
新しい技術なんですけれども、それは様々な困難があってこれまで実験的にしか試みられていませんでした。世界で初めての技術だというふうに思います。
Mass-produced corals. 60,000 tiny coral babies are being artificially bred at a farm on Akajima, a small island off the coast of Okinawa. But for what purpose? Okinatorishima is located 1,700 kilometers south of Tokyo. It is a small coral atoll. During high tide, it clears the surface by mere centimeters. Japan regards it as an island, but the existence of Okinatori is under threat.
今世紀中に海水面が20センチから1メートル上昇すると言われてますけれども、そうなると沖ノ鳥島は水没してしまう、そういう危機にあるわけです。
But Japan has decided that Okinatori must not vanish. Its maritime area represents a massive territorial expansion, bringing with it sovereign rights over fish and other natural resources.
日本の面積、国土面積が38万平方キロメートルに対して、今回その沖ノ鳥島を守ることによって、所有できる排他的経済水域が42万平方キロになっています。沖ノ鳥島の経済水域には、広大な水産資源と、鉱物資源があります。
This territory will be lost if the reef disappears. Kayane's corals are being used to save the atoll. Thousands of them have been shipped to Okinatori to preserve the reef and make it as large as possible. A pilot project on an island near Taiwan is studying what Okinatori might one day look like thanks to corals. Soon, Okinatori could become a real island like the pilot project on Barasu, which consists entirely of old corals. Japan's resourcefulness is not being welcomed by everyone, however. Its new maritime claims have raised tensions with its powerful neighbor China, which itself is currently involved in island territory disputes with a whole array of countries. As states attempt to extend their maritime zones as far as possible, many international conflicts have arisen.
Operating with due regard as required under international law.
In the South China Sea, 8 countries are fighting for oil reserves valued at $100 billion.
As required under international law.
There is no part of the world that is safer than others. In other words, with 53% of all maritime boundaries within the EEZ unresolved, we're seeing conflicts raising up to volatile levels driven predominantly by resource development for the offshore. Typically, we'll end up having a coastal frontage area that looks like this. And let's say that we have a land boundary where country A is sitting here and country B is sitting here. Back in the 70s, when we were moving from oil and gas exploration on land to the marine area, they may have negotiated a provisional boundary that sort of allowed them for country A to issue offshore oil and gas blocks and country B. And let's say in a more recent scenario, an extremely large discovery is made. And let's say the neighboring country, country B, then all of a sudden says, we'd like to have some of that. So they are starting to propose new boundaries, as this initial line was not even a modern day accepted boundary line.
Oceans have become contested territories the world over. Everyone wants a piece of the pie. New boundaries are being drawn for dividing up its riches. Powerful industries are on the move in the deep sea. No one can predict the consequences of this industrialization of the world's oceans. They are the consequences of a revolution that began years ago and has mostly gone unnoticed. The ocean is being divided up like land.
You also have to realize that the ocean is our future, so we need to have some way of deciding who is responsible for what and where and when. And so at this point in time, this is maybe not the ideal solution, but this is the solution that was created with the convention.
The world's oceans, far more than its continents, build a cohesive ecological system, a sensitive continuum in which what happens to one area can affect all the others. It is now up to the world's nations whether they will take responsibility for their newly acquired maritime territories.